Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected. Hey everyone, we have another great guest today on Gray Minds Think Alike. Meet Randee Kogan, a licensed psychotherapist and trauma specialist who works with clients dealing with grief, PTSD, and sexual and domestic violence. She has dedicated her life to helping others succeed in breaking habits and dealing with common and complex issues. Randee helps me personally as I learn to live with my grief, so I wanted to share her wisdom with the world. Hi, Randee. Thanks for speaking with us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
I can't wait to discuss some topics. I wanted to talk with you in particular because we know how important mental health is and finding the right specialist. So before we begin, if you can just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yes, so I have been in the field for about 36 years now. I started when I was 18 years old, and I've had the opportunity to work in numerous aspects of the field, such as custody evaluation. I worked with the chronic mentally ill. I had the opportunity to work on psychiatric units and facilities. When I got into the courthouse, when I had the opportunity to work in the courthouse, I started working with victims of violent crimes around 2004. When I started working with those victims, I felt as though this is where my passion lied. And my favorite part about working with victims and helping them through the healing process is watching that process right in front of me, watching them go from feeling hopeless and helpless and raw to learning the strength that they have within and what they're capable of, and how they can incorporate ever horrific trauma that they've endured into their lives with being able to live a fruitful, satisfied life as best as they can.
I commend you because that is very difficult to take such sadness and lifestyles and try to give them meaning again. I know that's what you do for me. So I guess you went into how you got started in trauma and specializing in that. Have you ever done any other type of therapy, counseling?
Absolutely. I work quite often with individuals who struggle with anxiety, mood disorders, other thought disorders, dissociative identity disorder, which comes from complex trauma. So yes, I do. I work with other aspects of symptoms and adjustment disorders, individuals who've experienced stress in their life that they just need time to overcome.
And I do know that you've also done some, I know we've spoken about it, just not you weren't a mediator. You did, were you a
custody
guardian?
evaluator.
You were custody
I was
evaluator.
a custody evaluator. I worked on dependency evaluations for about a year, and then custody evaluations for about 2 to 3 years in the Broward County Courthouse when custody evaluation was under the family court system.
Right. And how did you like doing that?
I absolutely loved it. This was around 1999. I did that till about 2004, and it was incredible. I had the opportunity to truly evaluate each parent and observe the interaction of parent and child in each of their homes. And I was able to speak to collateral sources and then come up with a recommendations report to the judge and assist the judge in the process of recommending time sharing and parental responsibility.
Well, that is very important. And when someone is looking for a therapist, let's say, do you think it's important that they actually seek someone out that specializes in their specific area that they're looking for? Or can it be general?
It can be general. I think that when it comes to complex trauma, think that it's important that they seek a therapist who is well-versed and understands how to navigate through the healing process. I think it's important with individuals who've experienced mood disorders or stress-related disorders. I think that what's important is building rapport and feeling that they're in a comfortable and safe environment with that particular therapist. And it's okay if it's not the first therapist you meet.
Right.
It's okay if it's not the second therapist you meet. That individual, you need to feel like you can open up and feel a sense of emotional safety and trust.
Right. When do you think someone should actually get help and talk to a therapist? Personally, I think everyone should.
Yes. I always recommend that it not being when they feel like they have no other options. When somebody feels symptoms coming that are not typical, anxiety symptoms, they feel that their depressive symptoms is starting to impact their daily functioning, I would absolutely recommend that they speak to somebody and find out what the source is.
Good tip. Now, how would you recommend that someone find a good therapist? What kind of things should they be looking for or asking? Should they be asking questions when they interview them or meet them for the first time?
Yes. So one main resource to find private practitioners is through psychologytoday.com. What I like about psychologytoday.com is they can filter through insurance, the preference of gender, what issues they want to make sure that particular therapist is versed in. They have an opportunity to see a photo, a bio, and many therapists also will offer free consultations where they have the opportunity to ask questions. I think it's important to make sure that particular therapist will meet your needs for therapy.
Yeah. And I always say, definitely, it is an interview process. And like you said, it's not always the first person that you go to. Sometimes you just, you want to find that one person that you can feel ultimately comfortable speaking and telling anything to, right? So I'm sure that does take a few tries.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk real quick about relationship, because I know that's something that is a big topic for a lot of my listeners and a lot of people that ask me questions. They're in relationships. They may not know that they are in domestic violence. Maybe they're not. But let's talk about the red flag, how someone could recognize if they are in a healthy or not so healthy relationship.
Okay. So first, I think that we need to define what characteristics of a healthy relationship are. Because if somebody doesn't know what those characteristics are, how are they going to know what red flags to look for?
Okay,
and
what are they?
Healthy characteristics. Let's think about the foundations of a relationship. Foundation is communication. That's something that's necessary in order to get to know somebody to see if a relationship is possible. What else is important to individuals? Respect, trust, loyalty, support. Depending upon somebody's age, one may look for financial stability, relationships in their own families. If they're older and have children, if they have children, what is the relationship with the children's other parent? And why, right? Why do they get along so well? Because I think of the children first. We put the children before our own feelings. Why don't you get along? Is it a power struggle? So that's going to say a lot as well, right? So financial stability as well as familial stability. If people are younger and they're in their 20s, what kind of relationships do they have with their families? Right. So it's very important that we look at the whole gamut of what's important to me.
Right.
It's important to me that somebody is loyal to me. Somebody is honest, that I can trust them, that I feel like I have a team.
Right.
That I feel like I'm being respected, that I feel that what I am giving to the relationship, I'm also receiving. So reciprocity is important.
Right. So I think a lot of times people are in a relationship and maybe they grew up seeing their family or their parents have some sort of dynamic and maybe look at that as to be the norm and it really isn't. So they self-sabotage or they don't think they're worthy of something else.
perhaps?
You're exactly right. And upbringing has a lot to do with it, right? If you were in a home where there is constant tension and chaos and yelling and conflict, you can go either way. That can become comfortable for you. And if that's comfortable, you're going to seek out those relationships as you get older. If you have an opportunity to heal from those experiences or be able to take yourself out of it and look at the situation objectively as you get older and more aware of what's going on, then you can look at for somebody who does not possess those qualities and will immediately see those qualities as red flags, right?
Now, how does someone recognize, like you said, the red flags, but if they're blinded by love and maybe they are getting the loyalty and the respect and some of those healthy qualities, but maybe there are also some not healthy qualities mixed in.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because many times what people will do is say they possess this and this. They're communicative and they're supportive, but they're not always very honest. Okay. So they'll start negotiating or justifying some characteristics that aren't very healthy and justifying the red flags. Now, when we talk about red flags, what are we speaking of? Because let's be honest, when you meet somebody for the first time, they're not going to smack you in the face to give you an idea that they're physically abusive. They're not going to call you a name when they first meet you. So sadly, you had mentioned earlier when you're looking for a therapist, there's like this interview, right? This formal interview. If we think about getting to know another person, there's this informal interview going on, right? That's an opportunity to get to know somebody, to see what qualities do they possess that are attractive to me or that meet my needs and values. So that's a very important time. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, when I'm working with somebody in their 20s, early 20s, and I say, if you're meeting somebody for the first time and they're starting to bring up sexual innuendos or sexual comments and focusing on that, we need to look at that as a red flag, right? Because it's really not something that should be addressed when you first meet somebody, right? So look at something like that as a red flag. When you're going to a restaurant and the hostess is seating you somewhere, and how do they treat the wait staff? How do they treat the staff there? Sounds so silly, but it's something to think about. I worked with a woman years ago, and she was in a horribly violent marriage for about 15 years. And it took her a number of years to get out of the relationship. She had gone through therapy. She really worked on herself for many years and felt very strong and ready to date. She went out with a gentleman one night and they went out to dinner. They were looking at the menus and having conversation. When the waitress came over, he ordered for the two of them without asking her what she would like. After he ordered, she put the menu down. She got up and she walked out of the restaurant because that was a red flag to her.
Wow.
To her, that indicated that this man is going to be controlling, and I am not going to put myself in a situation like that again.
Right. See, that's right. Smart bit. I feel like a lot of maybe women would say, wow, that's so thoughtful, or he's so gentlemanly, or he's taking control, and I like that.
Me feel safe. Exactly. And that's when we go back to, okay, what were our past experiences? Did we heal from those experiences? If you've never been in a situation like that, what are we looking for? If you have an individual that's sitting with you who is only speaking about themselves, we need to look at that as a red flag, right? Because when we're getting to know somebody, this conversation should absolutely be back and forth, should be reciprocal when we're getting to know someone. So that would be a red flag as well.
I would say so. Okay.
Go ahead. Red flags. What other red flags can we think of?
We're talking when we first meet someone or just in general?
In general.
In general, because you could be with someone for a year before you even see red flags. So I think that's even harder. I was talking with somebody recently
for 10 years.
Yeah, she said she was with him for 10 years. And one day she woke up and looked next to her and she's like, I don't even recognize the man in my bed. There are red flags, obviously, besides the obvious would be things that I went through, which coercive control and just that passive aggressive abuse where someone controlled you, but you're not even sure that you're being controlled.
And let's talk about control and break that down a little bit more, right?
Sure.
You mentioned that many times that when people are in a new relationship, that they can mistake something for, oh, she's being so good to me, right? So when somebody is asking you about what you're wearing, right?
Yes.
Do they care about what you're wearing and they want you to be safe? Or do they want to control your wardrobe? Right? Asking about who's in your phone. It's huge with young adults and teens. Show me your Snapchat. Why do you have all of these people on your Instagram? Okay, so social media control is very big, where they look at that as they love me and they want to make sure that nobody else is flirting with me. What I'm hearing then is then they don't trust you. So you're right. It can be a very fine line between this person really cares about me and this person is starting to control. Jealousy.
Yeah. That's big with everyone. And that might be a giant red flag for people who are just in love and they have an emotion, which I feel like everyone has some sort of jealousy at some point. How do you get past the jealousy? How do you say, okay, I'm not going to ask him who he's texting right now. I'm just going to learn to live with that feeling of jealousy and walk away. But that's hard.
Well, it is very hard, but in a healthy relationship, if you're having those kind of conversations with yourself, is that the right relationship for you? Because if you're feeling insecure, let's say that somebody's significant other had somebody like a photo of theirs, okay, and they're feeling insecure. If we're talking about a healthy relationship, then that individual should feel comfortable and safe to go up to their partner and say, I felt a little uneasy when this individual liked your photo, and have a conversation about it, right? If we're having to go around that conversation and say, okay, I'm not going to check their phone. I don't have to check their phone. I'm going to look at that as a red flag.
Right.
And on the other end, if you have somebody in the relationship, because we need to talk about technology, it's a major part of relationship these days. If somebody is constantly using their phone in secret, putting a passcode on and carrying it with them everywhere, is that a red flag? That should be a conversation that in a healthy relationship, you can say, I'm noticing that you're carrying your phone a lot. Do you feel the need to? Do you feel uncomfortable leaving your phone with me?
Right. Do you think a lot of people know each other's passwords? I'm just curious.
I think that comfortable people, yes, they do know each other's passwords because they have nothing to hide, or there are no passwords. These days, we have to have passwords to protect ourselves from other people. But I feel that healthy relationships, there's no reason why to share those passwords, because what are you hiding? And it's not that you have to give somebody a password, okay? It's not about that. I shouldn't have to. And if that's the kind of relationship that you have, where that's privacy for the two of you, but you have open communication about it, that's the dynamic of your relationship.
Yeah, social media is a big one. Even with just online dating, you could be in a relationship and you could have met online on a dating app, and their profile's still up, and they're getting messages, and who knows what's happening, especially in a new relationship, I should.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to take the time and get to know somebody. Okay. We don't want to rush that process, because that process is setting the stage for the continuation of that particular relationship.
Right.
So it's very important to really use that time to communicate.
And what do you do if the person that you're just starting dating still talks to their ex-girlfriends or ex-wives, or maybe they have children together and they have to have a relationship with their ex-wife or ex-husband? You can go both ways.
Absolutely. And I think conversations about the relationship and including the partner, if it's a serious relationship, and making sure that there's open communication, because that can absolutely work. There are many scenarios where divorced parents are able to communicate very comfortably and openly for the sake of the children, and significant others are a part of that. And I think that is healthy and absolutely attainable. When that doesn't happen is when one or both partners are more focused on themselves and a power struggle with that other parent, rather than the child. When the focus moves away from the child, then we don't have a healthy scenario there.
Now, going off topic for a second, how does one start dating again, maybe after a divorce? I'm just a couple tips. Yeah. How do you get back out there?
I think it's important to identify within you, are you healed from this divorce? Is there anything from that divorce that I'm still carrying with me? And if that's the case, I would recommend working through that before bringing that into your next relationship. And not because you're carrying baggage, no. But if you have some unhealed feelings about it, we don't want that to become the foundation of the next relationship. You deserve to be happy after a divorce. You deserve to be in a happy, healthy relationship. Make sure you feel that way as well.
Very smart. Yes. You definitely want to be ready to start dating, I guess you can say.
Exactly.
Okay,
and make sure it's a want and not a need, right?
Of course. Yes.
Right.
Now going back to healthy and not so healthy relationships, let's talk more about the not so healthy side. So we know what we should be looking for, the respect, the love, the communication. And you did say a couple of red flags already, but what is maybe one that someone wouldn't even think? So I know financial, any kind of control of finances is definitely a red flag.
And what does that look like? When we talk about financial abuse, what does that look like? Because that's very common. You're exactly right. A red flag is when you go into the relationship working and your partner tells you, you don't need to work. I would prefer that you stayed home and took care of the home if there's no children involved. I work and I make enough for the both of us. You don't need to work. That's a red flag. Wow. If you're going to school and wanting to further your education and your partner is dissuading you from either starting or continue, that's a red flag.
Right.
If you're okay, because what is that saying? Then go back to working at the job you're working at now when you want to further your degree to further your career. If your partner wants to stunt your career,
right,
your partner is planning to control your financial situation
and your personal growth.
No question. No,
but I feel like a lot of people would, wow, I don't have to work. I can get taken care of and know that someone will be there for me. A lot of people would want that. So that's definitely difficult because it does take away your power.
And you also have to ask yourself, is it taking away who I am? I have so many individuals coming to me saying, I lost my identity. I need to find myself again. So if you start finding yourself not being yourself, please look at that as a red flag. Because when you're in a relationship, the whole idea is that the two of you are together to lift one another and support one another's growth. If that's not happening and you're feeling stuck or stunted and you can't communicate this and seek the support that you feel you need, because the person that you're going to seek support from is the very person holding you down. Let's look at that.
And how do you have a conversation with that person if they are doing that? Do you just say, I'm not comfortable with that?
If you're in a relationship where communication is possible, then yes, you let them know. I feel like I'm starting to lose myself a little bit. I think I need more. I think I need to volunteer. I think I need to get a job. I know I want to do something more so I can grow. And that person sitting with you, if you're in a healthy relationship, will say, what are you thinking of? I think that's a great idea. Let's come up with some ideas.
Sure.
If the person sitting with you says, you don't feel like this is enough for you, I'm not enough for you, that's something now that you recognize as a red flag. And this person is not wanting me to grow. This person does not support my needs, wants, desires.
Now, what does someone do if they're in a relationship like that, but they don't have the finances to leave? They live together, they're married. What do they do?
Identify their support system. The most important thing is identifying your support system and not feeling bad that you're utilizing it. Many people, when they're in domestic violence situations, they want to protect their partner in case their partner gets better, in case they're able to work things out. So many times they'll protect their partner for a long time if they're staying in that relationship.
You go in like counseling together, like couples counseling?
If it's an abusive situation where that individual feels like they're being controlled, I do not recommend couples counseling at that time. Number one, typically the partner will go to appease you. They don't want to change the relationship because they're in control. So why would they want to change that relationship? Okay. So it's not going to be productive. What I recommend is that that individual seeks individual therapy first. Work through their feelings and emotions and thoughts within the relationship in order to gain the strength that is already in there, in order to be able to make a decision about, is this relationship where I want to be? Is this relationship meeting my needs?
Right.
Going into a couple situation will not provide them with that, with an abusive person.
And that abusive person should definitely seek counseling on their own to work through why they do the things that they do. They probably
unfortunately,
together.
Exactly. And unfortunately, individuals who are seeking power and control in a relationship rather than what a relationship truly has to offer doesn't have the insight to change or the desire. And if they don't have that insight or desire to change, therapy doesn't exist to them.
And sometimes they might not even know that they're doing things because it is a learned behavior, like we said, with family or parents. A lot of times someone maybe is abused and then that gets passed down to their child, that we see in a lot of celebrity instances. The abuse actually is, I don't want to say genetic.
Learned behavior.
Yeah.
Learned behavior. You're exactly right. And what happens in situations like that is these individuals they start to believe more and more that the abuse that they're enduring, that they are creating, is their truth, that they are justified in doing so. And unfortunately, because of that, that blocks the ability for awareness.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, especially when you've maybe been abused your whole life and you think that's normal. I think that.
Exactly. And many times on average, it takes an individual 7 times to permanently leave a relationship. It is not easy. When you hear people who have never experienced domestic violence to say, if anybody put their hands on me, I would just leave, or I would do this, I would do that. People need to understand the mental and emotional piece of abuse.
Right.
Mental and emotional abuse start there. And as time goes on, the abuser makes a victim believe that they don't have options, that they don't deserve to have options. And when that happens, it's much, much more difficult to leave a situation.
Absolutely. Now, do you think that someone ever graduates from therapy? Is there a certain point where you're like, okay, I think you really completed your steps and we don't need to continue?
That decision is always made between myself and my client, right? Because they're the only ones who know when they're ready in terms of their strength and their feeling of independence, their feeling of value, right? So it's important that the therapist and individual make that decision as a team.
Right.
Right? Because if I tell somebody, okay, now you're done, what am I doing? I'm telling them what to do.
Exactly.
And we don't want that, especially when they're moving through the healing process in a very healthy manner and they feel good about themselves. We want to make sure that they know that their life, their decisions. So we want to do it as a team.
Okay. That's smart. Let's say someone's in therapy and they're just not seeing the benefits, or they're like, this is stupid. Not getting anything out of it. What could you tell that person to make them really understand why they're there?
The one thing that I would tell them, I would question if they're ready for therapy, right? That's the first thing.
How does one
I would
become
ask them.
ready?
They have to want to come because they're ready to heal. They're ready to change something in their life that they feel is not working for them or is not healthy or doesn't feel good, right? It is up to that individual to seek out therapy. And if they're not ready, but they want to still be present, that's something that can be addressed between the therapist and the client. sometimes they're not ready to talk about what happened to them. They're not ready to become vulnerable.
Right.
So that's an opportunity for the therapist and client to build a rapport with one another, get to know their outlets, get to know their support system. So when this individual is ready, you'll already have that information to draw from to help them jumpstart this healing process that we know is going to be difficult for them.
I think that's probably the number one thing for someone that is hesitant about therapy is that they don't want to get vulnerable. They don't know something might be wrong with them. They just don't want to even rehash something that might bring something up.
That's exactly. And many times an individual is coming in thinking that they're accountable for much of what happened in the relationship. So there's a lot of shame
and guilt.
And guilt. Those are probably the top two signs that I see when people are not ready to speak. And that is okay, because it is on their terms when they're ready to tell their story. And then we can address, once they feel that they're in a safe environment, like we talked about in the beginning, about finding that therapist that they feel safe. And it may take 4 or 5 sessions for them to feel safe. And that's okay, because it's our job to go at their pace. I had a woman years ago. I run a trauma therapy group, and I've run trauma therapy groups for decades. And years ago, when I was working in the courthouse, I was running a women's trauma therapy group. And I had a woman come into group, and she came every single week, did not speak. She wore a very large brimmed hat every session. Okay. And she would futz around with her purse, what's in her purse, for 5 months. This person showed up every week. And one session, somebody was talking, and this woman was ready. And from that day on, she was an active participant in group. But it was on her terms when she felt ready. And that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes that certain something. You hear something and you relate and you just want to share.
Sometimes people need that space. They need that space, and they need to be given permission that they have that space to speak on their terms about their story.
I was just going to say, to talk about trauma specifically, how does someone know that they went through something traumatic? What is trauma?
Trauma is an experience somebody goes through where their life was threatened, or they experienced sexual violence, or they perceive their life as being threatened, or they witnessed something that has to do with a loss of life, a threat of life, or violence. It is something that they experience these trauma reactions, such as some that we're speaking of, some symptoms that we spoke of already: depression, anxiety, vigilance, hypervigilance. Trauma impacts somebody's life, their daily life, where they feel like their future life has been impacted.
And what does that look like? If someone went through something traumatic, sometimes they don't even know it.
They don't know it. Sometimes they're not ready to address it. Somebody can hold on to trauma for decades, or they're ready to talk about it right after the trauma.
Right.
It is not something that is easy. Many people, there are levels of impact. Okay. Many times there are levels of impact, and not for everybody. Sexual violence, I see this more. Individuals who experience sexual violence, the first is the initial reaction of what happened, right? Whatever that may be for somebody. Everybody reacts differently. After that, okay, how am I going to deal with what happened? And many people are not ready to deal with the pain of trauma. So many people self-medicate, and they self-medicate in very different ways. Some do through drugs and alcohol. Some do through harming themselves, self-harm through cutting. Some do through excessive exercise or controlling their eating habits. Some do through shopping. Any outlet that is the focus is off, but that only lasts for so long. And people use this saying, wherever you go, there you are. And it's true. So at some point when people are finished running, avoiding, self-medicating. Those who do, again, this isn't everybody, when then they're ready to settle down and give up some of these behaviors or actions that are no longer working, that's when the emotions will start surfacing, okay? And at that time, typically people are ready to address their trauma. But that can come at all different aspects of their lives. And I tell people, it is never too late.
Sure. Yep.
It doesn't matter if the trauma occurred 55 years ago. It is never too late to heal or address your trauma.
I write about this stuff. I know that a lot of abuse happens maybe as a child, and then as an adult is when they're ready to start dealing with it.
Right. And that's okay.
That's okay. And at least they do. And then it can have a relief at some point, just a relief.
Exactly. And that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for that release. And why do people go through trauma therapy, right? Why do I want to talk about it? Why do I want to rehash? What is talking going to do? And that's a question that people constantly ask. The goal of trauma therapy is not to forget about what happened, because that will never, ever happen. The goal is to desensitize the intensity of those symptoms that are affecting your daily life, so you can live your life knowing that you've experienced your trauma, but that your trauma is not taking over you.
And that's something that you and I work on.
Constantly, right?
Having to, like I always say, I will never get over grief. I will never get over this. This is something I have to live through every single day. And it's just getting to the next step, and how to make your life still have meaning and joy while living with something traumatic.
Exactly. And you and I talk about all the time. Don't forget about the little things that you do each day that you're accomplishing, because those little things are so significant when you are feeling so hopeless, like you can't go on another day. We need to celebrate the little achievements rather than looking for those little joys. That's exactly right. They're so important.
No, I agree. That's what I live for now, my little joys. Some days I do stay in bed, and it's okay.
It's okay. That's right.
Well, we
day you're going to get out
all day, but I know
that we can.
So much to do, but we're definitely going to have you back, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of questions from my listeners for you. So maybe we can even do a Q&A sometime.
I would love that.
Yeah, that would be great. Is there anything else you would like to say about therapy, the importance, any tips for someone maybe that doesn't have insurance?
Please don't feel it's too late. I want to say that over and over again. Please don't feel that you don't deserve. Please don't feel that just because you're out of a traumatic situation that it's just going to be forgotten about. Please know that there is support out there for you. Individuals who struggle financially, I would like to say most, but I cannot speak for everybody, but many practitioners will do a sliding scale. They also do have online platforms, BetterHelp, Talkspace. I worked for Talkspace years ago as a trauma therapist. So there are options. Self-support groups. There are many support groups out there.
And
I run a trauma therapy group. Facebook groups, any type of group where you can feel a sense of belonging and know you are not alone, because I can tell you, you are definitely not alone.
Yeah, and social media is great for that as well, to just find a community of people going through something similar, or maybe not similar, but you have similar feelings.
Or similar interests even. That would help too. Yes, very important.
Okay, well, that's definitely very helpful. And I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy I was able to be here with you.
Me too. All right. If anyone has any questions for Randee Kogan, please, you can email me and I will get the answers for you. All right. Bye, Randee.
Bye. Thank you so much.
If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at allie@graysonschoice.org. If you'd like to continue to hear our podcast, please consider donating at graysonschoice.org.